Good day. Welcome to Peterborough Matters. My name is Paul Rellinger, and with me is Mayor Diane Therrien. First things first, how you doing? How you keeping?
Thank you. Yeah, not too bad. It was nice weather this weekend. Got a lot, the dogs got a lot of walks. They really appreciated that. To the point where I think they were like, "No more. Let's just have a nap now." Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on as there has been. So just doing as the best that I can, and I think that's really what everybody's doing these days, right?
Yeah, I agree, and I think my big quest right now is a barber of some kind.
They're gonna be like swamped when they're back in business. I've seen a lot of hilarious haircuts and folks that need haircuts. So yeah.
well, a lot to
You're
talk
fine though.
about.
You're great, Paul.
Thank you.
You're fine. Don't worry about it.
You too. One of the places I wanted to start on, and I was thinking back to the crazy days of February when we could all gather and congregate. I was at an event that I know you were a part of. It was the Power Hour at the Chamber. It was held at the venue. And why I was thinking about that event is a big theme of that event was cooperation between levels of government. You were there, MP Monsef was there, MPP Smith, and County Warden Jones. And it's funny how here we are now, probably calling on greater cooperation between levels of government than we ever have before. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that level of cooperation. Has it been good? Are you pleased with it? Has it surprised you? It's funny how people come together when they have to.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you know, I talk about it a lot. I like politics because it's nonpartisan or supposed to be nonpartisan, and to me, that's politics would be better if everybody was always working for the best interest of the community, regardless of party lines. And so, in this circumstance, it has been really interesting and really good. We've had great communication between the local levels, so myself, the county and First Nation elected officials, as well as representatives from economic development and the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, Ontario, kind of everybody are on calls with Dave and Miriam, and they each have them every week. And so I've had very ongoing, easy communication, texting, emailing, phone calling with MPP Smith, with MP Monsef, and it's been great. I know that their teams too, because they've got people in their office that help with all the kind of minutia of the day-to-day world. They have been really working their butts off too to make sure that we're all on the same page across all different levels of government. And last night, MP Monsef with Minister Joly hosted an economic town hall that was facilitated by the Peterborough and Kawartha Chamber of Commerce's, the two Chamber of Commerce's, where they had moderated questions that came in, and it really spoke to that too. The fact that it doesn't really matter how you vote or where your party lines are or whatever. The bottom line is that everybody's struggling right now. Everybody's living in this era of uncertainty, of wanting to make sure that we can get through this now and then also down the line, and how do we work together to make sure that happens. And you can't go into factions or it's not going to work. You need to be able to say, we might disagree on some of these issues, but
Mhm.
the main issue that we should all agree on, regardless of party, or those of us at municipal level who are nonpartisan, like we want our residents and our communities to thrive. So it's been very positive.
And it's I guess we could chat forever about various programs that are being offered to help people at all the levels of government. But at the end of the day, and I'm hoping you would agree with this, is people right now are just looking for leadership, and it's important to them. It makes them feel better that somebody is watching out for them. And really, when we talk about that cooperation and you guys kind of working together, that's really what we're talking about here, is just putting out that aura of leadership that people are looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the messaging is really important. People, there's so many unknowns and uncertainties, and that's the problem, right? Is that uncertainty breeds fear, and people are scared when you don't know what's going to happen. And the reality is, right now, none of us really know what is going to happen in the long run. We don't know when the emergency orders are going to be lifted. They're getting reevaluated provincially tomorrow. But how can we make sure that at the local level, and then working, more regionally, and then feeding that up to the province and the feds, that we communicate out to people that, like, we're on it, we have a plan, we're working together. So even though there's, A, B, and C or unanswered questions, we're working to try to figure out the answers to D, E, and F, and that's what's happening right now. So we're doing our best. I know everybody's doing our best, not just at the elected official level, but there's so many folks behind the scenes that you don't see.
Mhm.
Staff level, like I mentioned earlier, the political staff, but also City Hall, the admin staff that you don't see at hospitals, the police station, all of those places that are working so hard to make sure everything carries on as normal as it can in these uncertain times.
Kind of an interesting weekend we just came through. Late last week, the number of positive cases for our region, which is Peterborough City and County, Hiawatha, and Curve Lake, stood at 86 late last week. I believe as of this morning, they were at 69. There were some errors reported in some testing that went to Ottawa. It's kind of brought or adjusted those numbers down somewhat. I guess I don't know how to take that. I guess it's a good thing that we have fewer cases reported at this point, but we have to have confidence in that testing procedure. And I'm wondering, how, like, your thoughts on that. I mean, obviously, can we still trust those numbers? And I am going to put the same question to the medical officer of health tomorrow as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the important thing to remember is that this is an unprecedented situation, as we know. This is uncharted territory for everyone. And so, 2 months ago, the testing wasn't as widely available as it is now. That has sort of changed. Policies and procedures with this are changing every day, if not every hour. And
Mhm.
so there's, always a margin of error, and that's, that's part of it. I think the important part that we need to be remembering and thinking about all the time as residents and members of the community is, well, how can we be doing our best to make sure that we're limiting that exposure and working together to keep that number down. So, again, science always changes and evolves when you learn new information. That's what experiments are for, is that you experiment. And if you, figure out that there's a better way to do it, that you do it. And so I know that that's what's happening in the field of testing and healthcare, is that they're constantly every day trying to refine the process, make it better, make it more, infallible, make sure that it is giving the best results possible.
Mhm.
But either way, it doesn't change the fact that we still need to be abiding by these physical distancing guidelines. We need to be wearing masks and staying, 6 feet from people, and doing all of those things to help keep not just ourselves, but all the members of our community safe.
Does it concern you, Diane, when you hear reports or see reports in other provinces, certainly south of the border to a large degree, of states opening up and restaurants opening up, and the impact that's kind of having on people here are saying, hey, well, why them? Why not us? And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I won't give you my thoughts on the leadership south of the border, but I will say that, our provincial and federal governments have been very clear that they're making decisions based in scientific evidence and best practices. And so, there is the argument that, and we know that right now, people are struggling. If you're struggling financially, then also your mental health and well-being is struggling. And we know that people are really feeling that isolation. We see it in kids too, who don't quite understand why they can't hang out with their friends. So there is a whole other aspect of that where we need to be thinking about, how do we address these mental health and social challenges that are going to come up from the repercussions of having to be isolated to save lives. And
Mhm.
so that's, I know that that's something that, municipally we only have so much power over, but the province and the feds have both put more money into telehealth, into talking about, this mental health and well-being piece, which is why we've said, on the weekend and a day like today where the sun is out, it is good for your mental health. So if you want to get out, just be smart about it. And I think that that's the difference. And I try not to follow a lot of what's going on in some of those states because it just makes me a little bit, upset. Um, but because that's the thing, I understand everybody wants to reopen. Nobody is saying that we don't want to reopen, but the problem
Mhm.
is we need to balance the health and well-being and lives of folks with the with those other repercussions, and it's a tough balance. It's a really tough balance. And I think the conversation that we had last night that I mentioned with Minister Monsef and Minister Melanie Joly, they talked a lot about knowing that there's going to need to be more resources into mental health and well-being, especially for a lot of those small business owners and folks that are really having a hard time being unable to provide for themselves, their families, and their employees. But again, we need to stick to it now. Otherwise, we're stuck in this situation for longer. And everybody wants to get out of this as soon as we can. And if you start reopening too soon, you're going to be brought back to square one.
One good thing, and I'm sure you'd agree, we're starting to hear terms that are a little bit more positive. One that comes to mind very quickly is post-COVID, which is nice to hear that in the discussion a little bit more. You're watching Peterborough Matters. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Peterborough Matters. My name is Paul Rellinger, and I'm joined, of course, by Mayor Diane Therrien. One of the things that we were talking about a little bit before we went on air is a financial report that's been put together by some of your people at the city, sort of looking at the COVID-19 response coming out of COVID-19 and the impact financially that's going to have on the city in terms of its responsibilities to its residents.
Mhm.
Maybe you can chat a little bit about that. I know there's a lot of material in there, but just give us a general overview of where that's coming from and what's it telling us.
Yeah, so that report is going to come out for our meeting next week, May 11th. And our CAO, Sandra Clancy, and our Commissioner of Corporate and Legislative Services, Richard Freeman, have been working really hard to put this together. And basically, there was a request, I guess back in March when we had our first meeting after things were postponed and we weren't sure how things were going to look like, to say, can we get some idea of what the financial impact is going to be on the fact that, back on March 13th, we closed city facilities, we canceled March break programs, we stopped collecting transit fare, and then we had, a property tax deferral for residents. So all of those things impact on the municipal budget because normally we're getting those revenues. So the report is basically, and again, they, kudos to staff, they put it together in a really quick turnaround time during a very uncertain period to talk about the preliminary financial impacts to the city. And so that report also, we know that in Ontario, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario and then their federal counterpart, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, have been advocating to the senior levels of government to help provide some financial assistance for municipalities. And so, in Ontario, municipalities are governed under the Municipal Act. We're not allowed to run operating deficits. So unlike other levels of government that can have those types of, running those deficits, we're not allowed to do that. And it's really hard when you don't have any operating money coming in,
Mhm.
but then you're still trying to pay staff and you're still trying to keep the buildings going and the buses going. So there is a request in there, and I know that numerous other municipalities have been putting those letters forward as well, to request from senior levels of government to provide some kind of operating grant or some kind of change in the way that we're legislated to help us get through the lost revenue and the ongoing, because this is a report in May that looks at March and April, but we still have months, at least a couple months ahead of us of these lost revenues and deferred property taxes. And so this is also the time right now where normally we go out in June and have our public budget meeting, and staff normally are working on the 2021 budget at this point in the cycle. So right now they're they're doing a great job, but they're also working with so many, again, back to the pieces around uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
And so we also know that, last week at council, myself and the rest approved the mayors and wardens joint economic task force. I'm also, we're getting up and rolling a social and environmental task force that will be working in conjunction with that environmental task force. And that will be looking at, well, how do we make sure that things keep running? The city, is a service provider. We need to make sure that we're able to still have clean drinking water and, garbage collection and sidewalks and all of those things. But when you don't have money coming in, it's hard. So anyways, that's a long way of saying that this report is coming next Monday. It's a very preliminary look at some of the impacts of that. But again, in this context of we don't really know when so the provincial emergency order is going to be re-examined tomorrow, maybe be lifted, probably be extended. And then municipally, we know our facilities are closed until the end of May. So that's, again, revenue lost for that month. So just kudos again to staff for working so hard on all of these unknown pieces. And we're going to have a lot of discussion about it at council.
And I guess it's important to remind folks that, any report such as this is a work in progress. And as you said, the situation seems to be changing daily just based on, where the numbers go, what we predict happening. And so, it's you kind of want an idea where you're headed, but it's tough to kind of determine that only because things are changing so quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, again, back on March 17th, when the province declared a state of emergency, we had already, and that mandated that, bars, restaurants, et cetera, close. We had already had a lot of local downtown businesses choose to say, we're going to close for health and safety reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, going on 2 months now that those places haven't had their doors open to the customer. And even if they're doing curbside delivery or takeout or deliver, they're hanging on by a thread.
Yep.
It's a really different scenario. And so I think it's going to be a tough conversation, and municipalities only have so many revenue tools. We don't have the same array of things that the province and the feds do.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about the programs that are rolling out at the provincial and federal level, they've been, again, going back to the theme we were talking about earlier in the program about cooperation. MPP Smith and MP Monsef have both been very receptive to feedback they've been getting from, not me, I'm not a small business owner, but from folks in the community that have said, the eligibility criteria for the CERB or for the rent relief are restrictive in this way. They've been really good at saying, okay, we're going to bring that back and try to fix it. Again, going on the fact that everybody's responding to this in rapid succession. And these programs were rolled out in a matter of weeks when normally it would take years to sort of roll that out.
Based on what you know, Diane, and what you've kind of experienced up to this point, what the municipality has experienced, are you confident that assistance will be there from the province and from the feds in some form to help out the municipality?
I mean, I think, yes, I'm optimistic because all 444 municipalities across Ontario, and then however many, I don't know how many thousand there are across the country, are in the same boat.
Yeah.
And we are lucky in Ontario that our provincial municipal affairs and housing minister, Steve Clark, was a former mayor. So he understands the realities that we're faced at the municipal level. Again, in Ontario, the province is our sort of governing structure, but I know that the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has been doing a lot of work to try to ensure that the federal government also knows that we are in need and they do, and they are the ones that have the ability to leverage income taxes in an equitable way and put those taxes on the 1% and close those loopholes, where if we did that, we could fund all of these programs and do get a lot of good things done.
Let's kind of switch topics here and maybe talk about something that's a little, still COVID-19 related, but certainly not as specific as we've been talking. But as you've gone through this process, what you've seen, what you've heard from Peterborough residents, what has surprised you about Peterborough and its response to this whole situation? And I mean, you're obviously a big flag waver for the city of Peterborough. You're the mayor, and you love the city for many different reasons, as I do. But
Yeah.
is there something about how people have responded to this and kind of worked together that surprised you in any way?
That's a good question, and I mean, I want to, you want to say yeah, but no, it hasn't been that surprising. People have come together, people have rallied. We saw it a month ago when there was these, outpourings of support for our healthcare workers and our hospital workers. And the concern that I get emails every day from people concerned about if they, staff at long-term care facilities, for example, or folks that live there, or employees at some of the, retail outlets that are still open. That's just how Peterborough operates. We do tend to band together. Occasionally there's issues on which we're divided. But I think, it's one of those, one of the highlights of it is that of the community is that people come together to support one another in really difficult times. And, we've seen that, and in my own neighborhood, and you see about it on social media, the different parades that people have had or not parades, but like the
Caravans
rallies that people have had for young kids whose birthday, they don't understand why their birthday parties are canceled. And going back to that issue, like I know my sister and my little nephew who's 2 doesn't understand why he can't see his friends from daycare, and he saw one at the park and wanted to hang out, and they didn't understand why they weren't allowed to hug each other. And so you have these communities coming together to rally that support, which I think is really indicative of our community. And that's one of the many reasons that I fell in love with this city and continue to be in love with this city, is that we do come together in times of crisis.
And it's kind of interesting, social media being what it is. We all like to criticize it and say, I'm going to get off Facebook. I'm going to get off Twitter. I've had it. And but what a godsend during this time in so many different ways for people, just in terms of their ability to still connect in some form. Could you imagine if if we just didn't have that ability, how tough this would be?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that Facebook comments are a godsend, but that's why I don't read them. But I do agree. It is, I've been able to have Zoom calls with my Oma, who's 92 and, lives down on Rice Lake. And I'd love to go see her, but I'm not going to do that.
Right.
And she got an iPad for Christmas, and good timing. And, we showed her how to use all that. And that's the thing, people, that's the other, again, going back to what we talked about earlier with mental health and well-being being a huge issue that we're going to have to deal with coming out the other side of this, is that, people feel really isolated because they are, and we're thankful that they are on the one sense because they're helping other people be safe. But we need to make sure that we're able to reach out to people. And we are really fortunate to have numerous different technologies and methodologies through which to reach out to people these days.
So let me get this straight. Your 92-year-old Oma has an iPad? Is that what you said?
She got it for Christmas. Yeah.
Wow.
The cutest thing probably I ever seen in my life was when we taught her how to Skype call her sister back in Holland. It was just amazing, because you couldn't imagine that 50 years ago. They would have never thought that was a thing.
Oh yeah, no, that's incredible.
And now you can do that, and she can see all of her great grandchildren that are across the country. It's remarkable.
Wow, how good for her. We're now going into or approaching 2 months since COVID-19 first kind of I believe it was around March 12th or 13th that things really started shutting down.
Yep.
We're coming up to that period where it's been 2 months. It's tough on people, as you said, but we're hanging in. What's your message just before we go for today? I know I asked you the same question last week, but just give us a message to people kind of moving forward in these next couple of crucial weeks. Good weather is now upon us, and that's a challenge alone.
Yeah, I mean, the good weather is a challenge. It is also, again, because of mental health and well-being, I certainly say, because I'm somebody whose mood changes with the weather a lot. So if you can go out and get some sun, do it, but stay away from folks. Stay your 2 meter distance. We're going to get through this. We have a little bit yet to go, but we're tough. We can do it. And we just all need to do it together.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Diane. And you've been watching Peterborough Matters. Please join us again next week.